election. Hey everyone, this is Nevin and Herschell Miller with another episode of the Patriotic Populist. Today we have an exciting show. We have our first guest for today's show. We have Brian Carroll, who was the 2020 presidential candidate for the American Solidarity Party, which upholds the ideas of Christian democracy. And Mr. Carroll's background includes majoring in history, I believe, and being a teacher both here in the United States and abroad, and has become politically active, ran in the 2016 congressional campaign against, amongst other individuals, Devin Nunes of California, who's the well-known Republican congressman, and then ran again in the 2020 presidential election as the American Solidarity Party presidential candidate, garnering, I think it was at least 35 to 40,000 votes. Welcome, Brian, or welcome, Mr. Carroll, excuse me.
Yeah, you can call me Brian. My students always had to call me Mr. Carroll, but peers can call me Brian. A couple of corrections. One, I ran against Devin Nunes in 2018, not 2016.
Oh.
And our final total in votes was 42,000 and some that we know of. But several states where we know we got some write-in votes don't count those. They never report those write-in votes. And so we may have finished this with as many as about 48,000, but we know of 42,000 for sure.
Well, that's a hell of an accomplishment nonetheless. I mean, for me, and I don't want to interject here because I believe this is a time I want to really listen to what Brian has to say. But the American Solidarity Party for me come out of nowhere. You know, I think the first mention that I know of the American Solidarity Party might have been in late 2019. And to think a party that is as relatively young as the ASP to get that many votes, I believe is a real testament to just how genuine that your platform is.
Yeah, our 2016 candidate got, again, 6,000 votes that we know of, plus some others that probably didn't get reported. But we feel pretty good in a year when the epidemic kept campaigning down. We went from 6,000 to 42,000 with a low budget campaign. I wasn't traveling. I did a couple of debates with other third-party candidates, and we didn't spend a lot of money, but we got some good press, both in Christianity Today, which is an evangelical publication, and several of the Catholic publications. And we got some good coverage from like the American Conservative magazine when they did their, whatever they call it at the end, with like 17 of their writers each endorsed somebody. 3 of the 17 endorsed us. The I Side With campaign, which called me a democratic socialist, gave us good coverage. I'm sure I'm the only democratic socialist in their mind anyway, that the American Conservative magazine has ever had anybody endorse. But we break the mold. You know, it's hard to peg us. It's hard to put us in a left-right conservative liberal framework, because we do. We slide all over the place with different opinions in different areas.
I'll tell you, one of your policies, case in point is that, from what I understand with the ASP, and I'm no expert, so I'm great if you can correct me on this. But the ASP is what y'all have a slogan y'all refer to as being whole life, and being very, and I don't want to use anti-abortion as a derogatory way, but being anti-abortion, but also anti-death penalty. And I don't think I'd ever seen that before. So could you explain to us why that is? Why are you both anti-abortion and anti-death penalty, and why do you think them are related concepts?
Well, the vocabulary we use is to either say we are whole life for the whole life, or sometimes we use the term consistent life. But we believe that the life issues are not limited to just abortion. We want to see not just babies born, but we want to see the conditions within society so that people can thrive from the cradle to the grave. Natural death, not assisted suicide. We want to see a respect for life that trumps everything else. Now, I shouldn't use the word Trump, but that overrides everything else. And a lot of that has been very carefully worked out in Catholic social teaching, but I came to a lot of those positions before I ever even knew there was such a thing as Catholic social teaching. For instance, on the death penalty, I got interested in it 20, 30 years ago, I guess, and started reading. And I was reading Mennonite stuff against the death penalty. And it was making a lot of sense to me. And so actually I was on the elder board of an evangelical free church when I was working through that and came up with the conclusion that the Bible does not support the death penalty. And kind of when I made that public, the other elders kind of looked at me kind of funny. And but I had, it's something that I had come to that position by myself. And so when I came to the Solidarity Party, and that was the position of the Solidarity Party, I was already there.
One question about your background, you mentioned that you started to come to those holistically pro-life positions before you entered the ASP. Did you start out, when you became politically involved, did you start out as a liberal progressive? Did you start out as a conservative or a Republican, or were you always an independent? How did that path develop to the ASP and to your positions?
Yeah, well, if you have to go back to the roots, as a 10-year-old, I supported Nixon against Kennedy, and painted a sign and put it on my wagon and dragged it around the block, to the eternal embarrassment of my siblings that I dragged with me. And then for a while, I kind of went, back and forth. Whichever party won, I figured the more interesting primary would be in the other party. So I always joined the party that had just lost. And I did that until 1980. And then simply on pro-life, I voted for Reagan. And actually, I voted for Reagan twice for governor and twice for president after having promised myself that I never would vote for Reagan, And so I stayed a Republican because I was pro-life. And never completely sold. I was a social conservative, but I was not an economic, I was not a Wall Street conservative. And so I was never completely comfortable there, but I did it for 35 years. And then I think it was 2010 in California, the Republicans ran Meg Whitman for governor, and she was pro-choice Republican. And I said, well, if the Republicans are going to run pro-choice candidates, then that gives me the freedom to go look at the Democrats. And I wound up voting for Jerry Brown, especially on his education policy. As a school teacher, I felt that Meg Whitman's education, she was against teachers. And that was kind of a self-interest. I think the schools were better off under Jerry Brown. But that also gave me the chance to actually kind of look at some Democratic positions. As long as I was voting straight pro-life,
Mm-hmm.
I didn't really have to look too hard at what the Democrats were talking about. And I was also very upset, again, California Governor Pete Wilson in the 90s, who was very much anti-Hispanics. His policies were very xenophobic. And I was teaching in a school that was 95% Hispanic, recent immigrants, either from Mexico or Latin America, Central America mostly. And his policies were very, very, to me, racist. And so I said, I don't want to be a part of that. And I think the Republican Party in California is today suffering from that because they gave themselves that image. And I thought it was a mistake at the time. And it has very much turned out to be so. So, when 2016 came around, or 2015 came around, and I looked at the Republican field, and I actually had supported Huckabee earlier, but even Huckabee had kind of soured on me. And I couldn't see a single Republican that appealed to me out of the, there were 20 or so in the race at that point. And then when Trump came along, I thought, no, his history was that everything he touched, he corrupted. He sucked it in. It became about him. And I was afraid for the pro-life movement. I was afraid that the pro-life movement would suddenly be about Trump instead of being about pro-life. I was afraid for the Republican Party. I think I foresaw in 2015 exactly what is happening to the Republican Party right now. And so the things that I cared about, the Christian witness of American church was going to be corrupted. And so I said, I can't do that. And so I actually quit the Republican Party and joined the Democratic Party long enough to vote for Bernie over Hillary. And then I happened to be in the East Coast at the time of the Democratic convention and stood outside the convention in Philadelphia and had an opportunity there to see Jill Stein speak. And I said, well, that's not what I'm looking for. And so when that convention was over and I got home, I said, all right, the 2016 election is a lost cause. Nothing good is going to come out of it. And so it's time to start looking ahead to the next elections. And it took me about 2 weeks poking around on the web, looking at different third parties to find the Solidarity Party. And I read their platform, and it only took one read. I said, yes, this is it. And so we were organizing in California, and I got in on the ground level and was part of the original convention that created the party in California, and was registered to be an elector. If Mike Maturin had carried California, I would have been one of California's electors in that election. It didn't happen. And then, started looking around and said, all right, if we're going to have a party, we've got to run somebody against something. And in my district, it seemed like Devin Nunes was a worthy opponent. And so I ran against him. That was a learning experience. I was still teaching full time. I had no team. I was the only member of the party in the district that I'm aware of. So no ground game, no money, no time. But I appeared in some candidate debates, and I marched in a couple parades, and it was a good experience. I got 1.3% of the vote. I beat the Libertarian. And by the time I had done that, other members of the party had decided that I had done such a good job losing that I should lose something bigger. And they decided to go ahead and nominate me for president.
Wow, that's a great story. In certain ways, that your story, your testimony dovetails how Herschel and I became disillusioned with the Republicans. One of the many things that disillusioned us with Trump was the whole caravan business and the use of immigrants who we feel are politically powerless as weapons to gain electoral votes. And while we're not, Herschel and I are not open borders advocates, we're also not our brand of nationalism. We are not xenophobic. Our issue parallels actually the ASP's platform on immigration, and which targets actually the employer abuse of immigrants at
Mm-hmm.
the expense of Americans. See, our issues were one of the things we disagree with modern conservatism about is they always like to pick on politically and economically powerless individuals. And I'm just going to say it flat out. It rubs both of us the wrong way.
Yeah.
But one of the things you mentioned, you disagreed or you didn't identify with Wall Street conservatism, particularly during the Reagan era, and that kind of perked my ears. What aspects of Wall Street conservatism do you disagree with? Their value system, their actions? What did you see during the times when you were the Reagan supporter that turned you off from that brand of conservatism, economically?
Yeah. No, I support safety nets. The there was always within Republican economic conservatives this idea that get rid of Social Security, um, and get rid of Medicare, get rid of all those kinds of things that are really helpful to people. And so I could never support that. For instance, I said I supported Huckabee in what did that must have been 2008, and I would have supported him in 2012 if he had run. Um, but he was he was big on this flat tax thing.
Mhm.
And to me, the flat tax is kind of a scam. And so I supported him uh, for social conservative things, but I kind of thought that his economic program was just a joke. I mean, it was just he was using it to get supporters, whether it was the Koch brothers or I don't know who else was financing him. But he was just a mouthpiece for somebody that was paying for it. I could not see anybody realistically say that that was going to work. And it would definitely be to the benefit of the super wealthy rather than the man in the street. And,
You know, if
and
I could cut in for just a second, that's one of the things I would love to tell the listeners of this is a
I'm
lot
sorry.
of. Oh, no, it's all
Yeah, I'm
right.
not hearing your comment.
Can you hear me now?
Yes.
Okay. One of the things that I try to talk to my conservative friends about, especially the flat tax comes up often, is they say, well, it's the most fair and balanced system because everybody pays the same no matter if you're poor or rich or whatever. But one of the things that I like to tell people about the flat tax is that proportional wealth it's more nuanced than just everybody. If a man makes $100, he pays 15, or if a man makes $1 million, he pays 150,000. A huge part of that argument leaves out the fact that at a certain point, disposable income starts to stack up on people. $15 out of $100 paycheck hurts me significantly more than $150,000 out of $1 million paycheck. It's another one of them ideas that it sounds great in concept, but once you start really diving into it, it's just another scam to try to get more money to the top of the food chain. Sorry for that.
Yeah. At a certain point, you have to say, what does that extra money buy for the person who's earned it? And of course, to a certain extent, it's a lot of little people who are working real hard to earn it for them. Uh, the decisions that the guy at the top is making are nowhere near worth what they're being paid. I don't think. Um, but I read a study. They had done a study among the super wealthy. What was it that motivated them to pursue more? And it was competition. It was just for the rights, the bragging rights to say, well, I've just moved up from number 7th richest man in the world to number 6th richest man in the world. And in the process, those guys can lose $2 billion in a day in the fluctuation of the stock market. And to me, I see too many people struggling to pay the bills every month. And those people are working hard. Some of the people right now that they're working 3 jobs because no one job will give them enough hours to qualify for health care. And so they've got 3 different jobs that are 28 hours each, which means they're working 80 hours a week or more. No health care, that goes on to the taxpayer. There's they don't have time to relax and be a parent to their kids. You can't tell me that a person who's working that many hours a week doesn't deserve to have the kinds of benefits that our society says should come with a job. People, the wealthy people who are complaining against these freeloaders, these lazy freeloaders who are getting everything off society for free. No, that's a lie. Nobody who's working 80 hours a week deserves to be slandered that way. And yet that is what is so often the rhetoric that comes from those who want to support a free market. And then they, we've seen over the last 30, 40 years, corporate raiders who buy a company and bleed it dry, get themselves a large hunk of money out of it and put a bunch of other people out of work. And yet our society rewards them. Those are the people that our society, the free market, supposedly, is rewarding. And to me, that's criminal. That should not be happening. We cannot allow that to happen.
No, and we couldn't agree with you more. That is something that we, Herschell and I, constantly inveigh against on this particular show. That's another reason why Herschell and I abandoned conservatism. And for me, one of my main issues is national security, and those same free market advocates are historically, even during the Cold War, you may even remember this, the Koch brothers, the Citizens for a Sound Economy, and even after the supposed end of the Cold War, throughout the 90s and 2000s, you had groups like the Cato Institute, Heritage Foundation, and the U.S. Chamber of Commerce, they all fell all over themselves, supposed anti-socialists, and yet they supported expanded trade relations with communist China, with Putin's Russia, and whatnot. These same free market individuals, all in the name of profit and globalism and expanding their business operations, they ended up throughout the 20th and 21st history, and I've written extensively about this, they've basically given economic and military sustenance and political legitimacy to some of the most ruthless totalitarian adversaries of the United States. Now, I'd like you to comment on that. I know on national security, the ASP takes more of a position that we have to scale back to some degree our involvements throughout the world without sacrificing the need for a strong military. And I know the ASP platform is taking a critical look at our trade agreements from a variety of points of view. What is your take on what I had said regarding how the free market right has emboldened the very enemies of the free market and free government worldwide. What are your thoughts on that?
Well, first of all, the trade agreements that we made. I'm thinking especially like the Trans-Pacific, was it
TPP, Trans-Pacific Partnership.
Yeah. That was designed to kind of encircle China, keep China from expanding at the expense of its neighbors, which I think was a worthy goal. But it was also, basically written by the corporations, and it allowed them to do, kind of freehand in polluting some things and doing other things that violate workers' rights. And we do need to corral China. We need to, do a better job of standing up to China, especially diplomatically. But that doesn't mean that we just turn everything over. We join these treaties, and the right wing says, well, we can't yield our sovereignty in these treaties, but we turn the sovereignty over to the corporations. Whether we yield our sovereignty to an international organization or we yield it to corporate powers, that's still yielding our national sovereignty. And so I do want to see international cooperation. We need to be working on protecting ourselves from climate change or climate weirding. We need to do a lot of things that have to be done at the level of international organizations. But we can't just turn that over to the corporations to write stuff that benefits them. We have to have things that benefit everything has ripple effects.
Mm-hmm.
For example, our treaties with Mexico allow us to sell a lot of Midwestern corn in Mexico, which does help our corn farmers, no question about that. But it destroys the economy of the subsistence corn farmers in Mexico.
That's right.
And then they're at our borders, trying to come across the border and find work up here.
Mm-hmm.
And that, of course, panics the right wing, and yet their policies have promoted that. I mean, they've pushed people into doing that.
Mm-hmm.
We have a lot of people coming up from El Salvador and Guatemala. Well, rising sea levels are pushing the indigenous people who live in the mangrove fishing villages. As the sea level rises, their economy is wiped out, and they have to find someplace else to go. Mm-hmm. And so, that spawns all the crime and gang stuff down there. Added also to our addiction to drugs from passing through there. Those people have to go someplace, and so that's why they're at our border. And the time to stop them from coming to our border is not after they're already moving, but it's back when their original economies are getting wiped out. We need to do things to protect them where they are so that they're more willing to stay where they are. People want to stay where they are. That's basic. You only leave if you're desperate. And so we need to do something to stop the desperation down there and reverse some of the damage we've already done. Fancy hotel, no doubt financed by Wall Street, goes down there and buys up a whole bunch of beachfront property and throws up a big fancy hotel for tourists.
Mm-hmm.
But it displaces all the people that were living in the villages on those beaches.
Mm-hmm.
So we need to be looking at things from a bigger picture. We need people to nuance our policies and look ahead a little bit and say, you know what, if you wipe out all these people's homes, they're going to move someplace and that's going to cause problems. So yeah, that kind of stuff.
Yeah, no, I think you hit the nail, so many nails on so many heads here, but I think the biggest nail you hit, which is something that is hopefully the audience knows is addressed in the ASP platform, is the issue of aggregated political power by private sector oligarchs. And to at least myself, and I would include Herschell in this, to me, that is the existential national security threat and domestic security threat and even planetary threat to our survival as a nation. Because as Thomas Jefferson said in a letter, I'm paraphrasing him, merchants have no country. Because you look at the Trans-Pacific Partnership as an example. That agreement, even by Hillary Clinton's own admission, would have enriched communist Vietnam. And the Obama administration talked with a forked tongue on TPP when they were saying that it was done. And a lot of their Tea Party Republican supporters that supported TPP, like Ted Cruz, they all said, oh, this is going to stand up to China and everything. But yet, Obama administration State Department officials, including John Kerry on Mir TV in Russia, said that we would allow China and Russia into the TPP. So, there's throughout America's, and this as a history academic, as history teacher yourself and a historian, throughout the Cold War and even today, America has always had a very schizophrenic policy when it came to its adversaries during World War II with the Axis powers, and now with us. It's like we fight them, we oppose them, we write resolutions against them, but yet we trade with them, or we give a wink and a nod for American corporations to ship technology and whatnot. So I think one of the things, and one of the purposes of our show is for Herschell and I, is to bring like-minded individuals together. I guess one of our grand dreams is to bring populist and nationalists and well-meaning independent individuals to the table to create, maybe down the line, a counter coalition to push against this neoliberal, market fundamentalist, soulless garbage, for the lack of a better word, to push it slowly out of the mainstream. So I feel like we're really connecting on a lot of different ideas of the sources of our country's problem. But I wanted to end my little, response to your answer there. I think your answers were great. We're totally spot on that. And I wanted to cede the microphone, so to speak, to Herschell. Herschell, did you have any follow-up questions?
So this is one that anytime you're talking to somebody that's in a position of prominence in the third party, I think it's an important question to ask is, although I'm pretty sure all three of us in this interview, we would love for third parties to be a much easier and viable strategy to achieve political success. The harsh reality of the situation is that third parties face an uphill battle from start to finish. So what my question would be, I guess, is, so a man like you, Brian, that you've stated your ideological conviction fairly well, and you wear them well. Why not try to reform one of the bigger parties from the inside? And I know that that's easier said than done, but seems like starting a third party. Oh, no, you didn't start it, but being part of a third party is just as difficult as that would be, if not more.
Well, third parties can win a couple ways. Even when they're not likely to actually win an election, when a third party demonstrates some strength, one of the other parties will steal its ideas. And if either one of the parties wants to steal our ideas, they're welcome to them. One of the things that I saw coming when I joined this party was that the other two parties are at a point of realignment. In other words, you've already seen the Republican Party in the last couple months splitting. They're losing a lot of people are just re-registering outside the party, and we don't know where all of them are going. Some of them may still be independents, and not all of them would even be comfortable in the American Solidarity Party. But several thousands, the statistics I saw, have left the Republican Party in California since January, and I think I saw similar things in Florida and some other states. And so one of my goals in running for president last year was to get our party to a point where we would be a place for people to land. As people are jumping ship from the other parties, we would at least be well enough known that people would be able to find us. And again, we ran a very low budget campaign, but we've had a lot of people join the party. We had a whole bunch join us in November who said, we had never heard of your party till we saw you in the results of the voting. We were on the ballot in 8 states. And so in states like Wisconsin and Illinois and Louisiana, Mississippi, the first time people saw us as a party was when they looked at their sample ballots. And a lot of people took their sample ballots and went running to, Wikipedia or iSide or some of the other things and looked us up. And that's how they found us. Or they didn't find us until the election results. And they said, oh, who are those people? And so we're at a point where now people who are leaving the other parties can find us. And so we will grow. And as we grow, the other two parties are going to be looking and saying, oh, what can we do to draw those people back? Right now in the Democratic Party, you've got 21 million pro-life Democrats. And obviously the Biden administration is not listening to any of their desires. And so those people are going to be looking for a new home. And you've got Republicans that are trying to figure out what to do. You've got, for example, just this week, there were a whole bunch of evangelicals. They formed a group called Evangelicals for Biden, and they are bitterly disappointed. And I think they should have foreseen the fact that Biden was not going to do anything to help them. But they went out on a limb and endorsed Biden, and now they're very embarrassed by that. All right, they're going to be looking for a new home. And so there's a lot of people out there that are ripe for our party. And I think we're going to grow a lot. But the other thing that's happening, a lot of states are looking at ranked choice voting. They're looking at other kinds of voting reforms that will help us. We have people starting to run in some local races. Right now, there's a special election in Wisconsin for a state level job. Ben Smith, all right, his name is Ben, but he's running up there for a state Senate or state assembly in a special election. And that's going on across the country. We have several of those going on. So we're growing and we're building at the local level. And those are the things that a party needs to do. And if the other parties start to feel threatened by what we're doing, they'll steal our ideas, and that's fine. We win.
Well, that's a good point. And I have to say the idea of a Christian distributist Republican Party, that's a pretty appealing idea.
It made me rejoin the Republican Party. I broke with them, and similar to Mr. Carroll, I joined the Democratic Party just so I could vote for Bernie in the primary. So, I mean, to be honest with you, I did that in 2020 and gave him money. So, but, I had a question on top of the third party, and I think that's a very good idea. That's a good roadmap for the potential influx of new ASP members from the pro-life Democrats, the anti-abortion Democrats that Biden has disappointed. What do you say? I'm sure you get this all the time, because I've told people thinking of voting for a third party in this election, and people say, "Oh, that's just a wasted vote," and you're just sealing Trump's victory or Biden's victory. How could you do that? What is your response to such individuals? Because I get that all the time. It really is kind of nauseating.
If you vote for what you don't want and win, have you really won? That's what the evangelicals for Biden have just learned. They voted for Biden thinking that they would be better off, and they realized, Biden's not going to give them anything. And so they voted for what they didn't want, thinking it was the lesser of two evils. Mm-hmm. And they've discovered that it's not what they really wanted. They have not won. Even though the guy they voted for won the election, they have not won on the issues that were important to them.
Exactly. Because the lesser of two evils, you're still getting evil. You're still getting bad policies, regardless. And if more people, I always would say, if more people actually dropped saying, "Oh, you're going to vote in Trump or vote in Biden if you vote for the lesser of two evils," or whatever, and vote third party. Well, if everybody came together and said, "Oh, I really identify with that third party," then you would actually have policies that you would want, that most American people would like to see for their families and countrymen and their children.
We would especially see that if we get ranked choice voting.
Yeah.
Yes, very true, which is being, I believe it's in some states, correct me if I'm wrong, I think it's in Maine, and I know it's been on the ballot on a few other states, if I recollect correctly.
Statewide in Maine, and there's a bunch of different cities that use it within just the city elections.
Mm-hmm.
And there are a bunch of states that are working right now on ballot propositions to bring it in. Professional politicians are not very fond of it, but coalitions of voters are working to get it onto state ballots as a proposition.
Well, speaking of coalitions, I think that's the one key strategy for everybody going forward, because it's been my observation as I've looked around the political landscape of America over the last couple of years, and I don't have anything against the ASP or any other third party, but it's one of the things that kind of comes to mind is that there seems to be, at least in flashes, certain strength behind populist movements in the United States. I mean, yes, you have various degrees of populist, but the general consensus of, the middle class and the working class are struggling right now and we need assistance. So this is something I'm wondering. So how would I say this? Do you think there is a future for the ASP to build coalitions with other third parties to try to help achieve electoral success? Or do you think the party as a whole is going to try to continue on its own path?
Well, we have active programs going on right now to find commonality with some of the other third parties. For instance, all the third parties would benefit from ranked choice voting. And so we are, with many of those parties, supporting the statewide efforts or wherever it's going on to try and get ranked choice voting. We're working with them. And we do have relationships with them. We have our national committee and members of our leadership that are not even officially, they're just, they're leaders on the basis of what they're doing, even without an elected position. But they're constantly in contact with some of the other parties, parties where we don't agree with them on anything else except, some procedural things like ranked choice voting, and we're able to work with them on that. Or we have some common interests in, how many signatures does it take to get on the ballot? Some of the states are so easy to get on the ballot. And, in Louisiana, for example, to get on the ballot, we had to submit a slate of electoral candidates, one from each congressional district, and some paperwork. But as a result of that, of course, there were lots of candidates on the ballot. Colorado was another one. It was really easy to get on the ballot in Colorado, but there were 30 candidates. And so there's trade-offs, and you want to come up with some kind of reasonable threshold that you have to get across to get onto the ballot. But all the third parties are interested in the results of that. North and South Carolina were impossible for anybody to get on the ballot. It was ridiculous. And so in individual states, we're working with other parties where we have a common interest, and we will continue to do that if we are elected where we have other policy interests. We have, as a pro-life for the whole life party, we share climate concerns with the Green Party. We share some social conservative interests with the Prohibition Party. So we do, as we pick and choose our policies that we want to talk about, we have a shifting group of potential allies, and we want to reach out and work on them. That's what we need in this country more. When there were 10 Republicans that went to Biden and basically said, we'd like to work with you, and he thumbed his nose at him and said, we don't need you. We're just going to do it without you. Well, that's not good for democracy. If the two parties can't work together, even at the margins, then every time we have an election, we're going to have a zigzag, course. It's kind of like the Mexico City policy. Every time a Republican president comes in, very first day, he reinstitutes the abortion, no American money for foreign abortion organizations, the Mexico City policy. And whenever a Democrat's elected, first day in, they rescind the Mexico City policy. And as a result, the United States zigs and zags. Foreign countries don't know what they can depend on. When Trump came in and pulled us out of the Paris Accords, climate accords, and of course, Biden comes in the very first day and puts us back in the accords, foreign governments want to be able to say they know what the United States is going to do. And so there has to be some consistency. And that only comes when our policies are generated where there's overlap between the two parties in their beliefs, and the party discipline in both parties is so tight that you get somebody like a, a well, like a Tulsi Gabbard, who had lots of policies that she shared with us, and they were no longer orthodox democratic policies, and she got pushed out of the party. Mm-hmm. Or Congressman Dan Lipinski in Illinois, pro-life, and the Democrats targeted him. They put an enormous amount of money into primarying a sitting Democratic congressman, and we can't have that kind of moving to the extremes and still have any kind of policies made from the center.
Mm. And as a historian yourself, briefly, or you could explain at length, why do you think American politics has been characterized by such hyper-partisanship? What factors or what historical events do you trace, the American politics devolving to that hyper-partisanship? I know it's kind of a long question, but, just some observations.
Well, just as an observation, I was in South America for a total of 9 years, late 80s, early 90s. I was there for 5, came home for 4, and then went back for another, came back for 2 and went back for another 4 down there. But when I came back, I noticed that there was a change. So I came back in 95. And during that period, for example, Rush Limbaugh had become very popular. And I had a bunch of friends at church who were, always talking about Rush and how great he was. And so I tuned in, and he had kind of a funny shtick. I enjoyed him for about a week. And then I said, this kind of scoffing, and it's funny, but it's not going to help us as a country. It's going to pull us apart, and I think it did. I stopped listening to it, but there's more and more of that kind of thing. And then about that same time, Newt Gingrich took over the Republican Party in Congress, and he basically, said, well, we're not going to work with those guys at all. Or where they could not even support a good idea if the other side was going to get credit for that idea. And you get reports from Congress. West Virginia Congressman Thomas Massey has a great YouTube series where he talks about, you get these people who have spent an enormous amount of energy and money to be elected to Congress because they have these ideas that they want to help the country with, and they get up there, and the party machinery simply tells them how they're going to vote. They don't have the freedom to vote anymore. We spend billions and billions and billions of dollars electing people to go up there and think for us, and they arrive and they're told, don't think, just do what you're told. So there's all kinds of reasons, and we're self-sorting. Most Americans live in districts where they don't even know anybody from the other party. In Los Angeles, you would have a hard time. Democrats in Los Angeles have a hard time finding a Republican in their social circle. Mm-hmm. I'm sure the same thing happens in red states. I happen to be in a red county in a blue state. But I see that around me. I have friends that I'm sure I am either the only non-Democrat on their Facebook friends list or the only non-Republican on their Facebook friends list. And when we sort ourselves out like that, and we stop seeing, Democrats stop seeing Republicans as fellow Americans, and Republicans stop seeing Democrats as fellow Americans, they're not fellow Americans anymore. They're the enemy. And we can't have that. If we're going to be a country, we can't have that.
I believe that. And I'll say that from my personal experience in one of the most heavily Republican areas in the most heavily Republican state in the country, they don't see Californians as people or New Yorkers as people anymore. They're enemies. And like you said, it's a horrible tragedy because look, I'm not happy with American politics. And this whole show is dedicated to all of the reasons that me and Nevin are unhappy with American politics. But, these people here lately that I've, listened to, I have no idea how this country will survive for another 10 years, much less, going into the next century. And it scares me to death because, I'm a father of two small children. I have a wife, I have a home, and I have the life that a lot of people wish they could have. But I worry myself to death some days just thinking about the possibility that this country could just tear itself in half because people are trying to get rich off of controversy. And I have a policy of not talking ill of the dead, so I'm going to leave Rush out of this. But when I look around YouTube, various YouTube politics, nearly all of it is concerned with who can write the most controversial story or who can take the hardest position. And it's one of the reasons that I appreciate the ASP so much is because from my time of following you on your social media, or the ASP and you seem to be very opposed to inflammatory rhetoric. And I have to commend you for that. I really do. Mm-hmm. So let me ask you this, because we're running pretty low on time now, and I don't want to have to keep you much longer. What is the future for Brian Carroll and ASP?
Well, personally, I'm 71 now. I have told the party I will not be the candidate in 2024. I don't think it's good for any party to be built around one personality. The parties that, for instance, Kanye West, the birthday party. Well, if you don't have Kanye West, you don't have a party. I don't want to have the American Solidarity Party be based on me. It's based on the strongest platform in the United States. And so I've told the party that I will not be the candidate next time. I am open to, if things lift up a little bit and we have some travel, I would enjoy in 2024, if my health permits it, traveling the country and helping to elect somebody else. But I want the party to go through the process of developing new candidates and finding somebody new for next time. So personally, that's where we're at. As far as the party goes, I'm very excited about local candidates that are running right now in several states, but it's all local stuff. It's not even statewide offices. It's local boards of one kind or another, or state legislature. So I'm excited to see that, and I think that's the logical next step that we have to work through. We're going to add more members. We're going to develop our state committees. We have some really strong committees in several states that really developed during this election. And so now that they are organized, we're working hard to make sure that the interest doesn't drop off between elections. But we've got a great national committee making a lot of good decisions. I'm not on that committee, but I'm following kind of what they're doing, and I approve of the things they're doing, the direction they're taking. They're building the more nuts and bolts kinds of things that a party has to have. We did this last election. I'm not actually sure what the party end spent. They did hire some petition gatherers and things like that, and I don't even know what they spent on it, but I'm fairly certain that between donations to my campaign and what the party spent, we probably spent well below $60,000 or $70,000 max, and we got 42,000 votes. When you look at guys like Biden and Trump, they were spending $30-40 a piece for every vote they got, and we were spending maybe $1.50 at max if you total up all the different spending. But we need to up our game and come up with more donors. We need to train. We have, as of the end of my campaign, we did not have a single paid staff member in the party anywhere in the campaign. Everybody was volunteer. Well, we need to, go to the point where we can actually hire some people full time to do party things. So those are all the kinds of things that we're growing to have ready for the next elections.
Yeah. Well, Brian, I think I'll speak for Nevin here when I say it's been an absolute pleasure to have you on. And to anybody that has listened to this, I hope that we present some good content here for you. Make sure to like, share, and subscribe, and comment your thought down below. Nevin, you got any words in closing?
No, I think, Herschel, you summarized my views perfectly. I think, Brian, this was an excellent interview. I definitely enjoyed hearing all of your insights. Perhaps in the future, if you're inclined, we'd love to have you on again on our program. And it's definitely been a very fun and very informative interview. I appreciate it very much. I'm very flattered and honored to have you.
Well, it's been my pleasure. My project right now, one of my projects right now is finishing up a novel I've been working on for 50 years. So when I finish that, I'll get back to you, and you can have me on, and I'll plug my book.
I just finished my book project, and it's the last book I'm writing. It's a very daunting task, to say the least.
Thank you.
I actually showed my wife the first couple pages of this book on our first date 50 years ago. And I've been working on it off and on all this time. I did get used it as my thesis for a Master of Fine Arts in Creative Writing. But even that was 12 years ago, and there's still several chapters to finish the book. So that's my big project now.
Nice. I love it. Well, maybe we'll have you back on. You can talk about your book if you want.
Okay.
All right. Well, I've enjoyed it.
Likewise. Thank you so much, and enjoy the rest of your weekend.
You too. Stay out. Oh, let's see. Oklahoma's getting rain.
Yeah, we're getting rain.
All right. Well, go out and enjoy a walk in the rain.
I'll make sure to do that, Mr. Carroll.
And I'm going to have fun in the sun, as they say.
All righty. Very good. Nice meeting you.
Nice meeting you too. Take care now.
Okay.